Okay, it appears that we're live on YouTube now, so I guess this is the time to say welcome. I didn't know if Alex was coming in to do that, but I'm presuming not. So anyway, welcome everyone to Office Hours. We appreciate your being here. For those of you who have not been here before, welcome. We do this every single day, starting at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We go usually until around 9 or so. It is a global conversation of sorts because, as you will see from the names and the locations of the people here on the panel, and who come in with questions, we literally reach pretty much all around the world. This is kind of a tech discussion for the work from home era. We start with general chat, and you will see that happen in front of you if you arrive. Now, if you want to become part of the panel, there is a process for doing that. What you do basically is raise your Zoom hand as soon as you come in, and if you have good audio and good video and want to participate, we will allow you onto the panel between that 6 o'clock and about 6:40. At 6:40, the panel gets locked down, so if you don't become a panelist during that time, then you'll have to wait until the next day for that to happen. At 6:43 every morning, we send out a Discord link, and Discord is the service we use to chat 24/7 when the show is not on. And so that Discord link goes out, and we start what are called the mic checks, and you can watch them every morning. And essentially, we're here making sure our tech is up to snuff because we want the show to look and sound good. At 7 a.m., the show itself starts, and most days we go live on YouTube. So if you're coming into us via YouTube, welcome. If you'd like to get into the system and you're coming from YouTube, what you have to do is look on your Zoom chat if you're watching via Zoom, and you will see a link to Discord. Discord is that system where we chat the rest of the day. And you can follow the link on Discord and eventually become a panelist. When you do that, you can appear here. And there are a couple of things that you should know. First and foremost, the show itself is driven by the questions that the viewers ask in Discord. And it's not just, you can post a question. You will go to the center tab in the Discord screen, and you'll be able to see a little box there where you can ask your questions. Then a couple of things happen. Once your question gets in, you can it will allow everybody else to vote on that question. And we spend the most time and spend the most energy in the show, especially the first part of the show, talking about the questions that are most highly rated. So it's really important that everybody watching vote on the questions that you want us to address at length, and then we will do this. Today particularly is Saturday, and Saturday is our education day. Now, mostly at 7 o'clock when the show starts, we lock down the panel. Today is our exception because we have a focus on education that happens every Saturday, and we bring in a bunch of professional educators. When the show does the transition after the first hour, you will see that happen today. So if you have questions about education, those will start at about 8 o'clock Pacific time. And I think that's kind of the overview of the show. So welcome. And I think it's about time Guy. Oh, no, Mickey's here. Mickey's going to handle cutting the show, and Guy is going. Can you handle questions for us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take the first one in from John. So John Pewitt here on the panel from Huntersville says, "Can Keynote be used with a teleprompter? If so, how?"
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people use Keynote as a simple teleprompter thing. Most prompters work, whatever signal you have on a laptop, they're mostly run by laptops now. Once upon a time, there were other sources of teleprompting, but typically that just gets fed into a teleprompter, and Keynote can be used if the screen on your teleprompter accepts a video signal in, and most do today. In the old days, we used to have to use VGA for our teleprompters, but it's mostly just a video screen now. So sure. John, do you want to amplify things?
Yeah, I wasn't, I guess, clear enough because I left out some key details. Okay. The screen is the iPad, and the Keynote will be on the iPad. So I couldn't figure out a way to reverse the image on the iPad.
That will normally be handled by the software you decide to run for your prompter on the iPad, and there are a number of them. I use one called Teleprompt Plus. I think it's up to version 3. It's in the App Store. It's not particularly expensive, and most of those teleprompter-specific apps will allow the screen mirroring, and you can also flip things around because people have prompters in different kind of aspects. So the software will normally handle that, and you don't have to do real complex things. If you're doing a lot of teleprompting, and that's kind of a self-prompter or a low-end prompter solution. It's one thing that's cool about it is that it's often Wi-Fi tied to a phone so that you can run the scroll from your phone while the iPad that's in front of or below the teleprompter reflecting off the beam splitter glass shows the person who's doing the show that way how things are going. So you can speed up or slow down and things like that. That's typical teleprompting. And these small systems do that. If you get into bigger stuff where you want an actual prompter operator, it becomes much more complex. And if you're working with an executive or somebody whose time is very valuable, I know I always suggest that you find a legitimate teleprompter operator who understands the skills of being able to jump to places, move back and forward, and most important, re-edit the actual script that they're working on while they're doing them. Having done a lot of this kind of thing over the course of my career, I can tell you I've seen very few prompter sessions where somebody hasn't come up with, oh, we can improve that, let's change it right now on the fly. So an operator is a really useful thing. Anybody else have any other prompter suggestions or experiences? Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, John, I'm not sure if you caught that episode where we had Michelle, who operates prompters for Alex, come in, but man, it was cool. She's actually doing it remotely now with OBS Ninja. So she's able to, it's like Zoom, but she's able to just push her screen remotely. And so she's just operating as if she's there. It's pretty amazing that people are doing that these days.
Yeah, it's the Zoomification of the world. You can actually bring a teleprompter operator essentially into a meeting and have them from anywhere in the world be teleprompting your production. Go ahead, Sky.
So from an archival educational point of view, how would we encourage John to go, hey, look that session up and go review that thing? Jeffrey, do you have a recommendation of how he could find that piece of knowledge on tape in YouTube?
Well, in the Discord that we have, are the Discords all indexed back to teleprompt? The show that was about teleprompting? I can't remember how they tag the subjects of the shows.
Therein lies my question. That's exactly my question.
When I started doing it, everything is focus on something. So focus on teleprompters.
There may be focus on teleprompting as the show title. If so, that would be great. And then you can just look up that in the Discord once you are part of the 1,000 or so of us who chat in Discord. Okay, John Pewitt, you had another. You want to do more?
Yeah, it looks like it was October 7th, 2020. So I'll put a link to the one I found, if it's the right one, on Mokana.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the next question then. I think we've covered that.
All right, watching Doug's cat crawl across his head here. Doug Ferguson with the cat in for the win. He asks, in a Zoom meeting, is there a setting to turn off all attendees except for host?
Did Doug ask that or the cat?
Yeah, maybe the cat wants that. The turn off. What do you exactly mean by turn off? There's mute all, which will mute all, I think, except the host, but I'm not sure that will stop their video. So I've been in meetings where, for one reason or another, particularly early meetings in Zoom where there wasn't a ton of bandwidth, and the host was suggesting that everybody try to turn off their video to make the signals as small as possible to allow the presenter enough bandwidth to get their, I don't know if that was a good strategy or not, but I've seen it happen. And it seemed to me everybody had to do it manually. Does anybody know if there's a kill all video command? I don't know. Sky, pop in, and then Jeffrey.
Well, my internet is horrible right now. Hopefully I'm coming through. The pin whoever you want for, pin to everybody, I think would be the alt solution to that, but I see there's other possibilities as well.
Jeffrey?
Well, every morning, well, not every morning, but certain mornings when we come in here, we'll be prompted that the video hasn't started yet. So there is an option for the host to turn on and off the video of the other people. So you keep it turned off and then you bring them in one by one. I suppose that would probably work to your what you want to do.
I wonder if that works both ways. I wonder if the host can just kill globally all the video connections once they're made. That'd be interesting to look into. Lauren's had his hand up, and then we'll go to Victor. They do. Okay.
I'm wondering if it's possible to build something like this with Zoom OSC. I don't know.
That'd be interesting. There are a lot of clever things they can do. Victor, go ahead and pop in.
That was exactly my point. I would contact Andy. If there is a way to do it, it's going to be through Zoom OSC.
Yeah. I agree. There is a way. I think just the host, not the co-host, but I think the host has some control over global video. I know I had to enable it this morning for the first time because it came in with default off and we had to find it. So there are links into that. I think we're done with that. Let's move on to the next question.
Actually, I got one on that one. Yeah, it's called
okay.
webinar, Doug. Webinar. You just turn on webinar, and then that's the way that nobody else can see.
Well, that's
unless
the reason
they need to speak.
There's 3 simultaneous sessions going on at the same time, and I just didn't want to pay for 3 webinar accounts rather than just having 3 meetings and like, hey, everybody but the host shut off the video. And if they want some interaction, then they can turn them on. But I was trying to avoid the multiple accounts with multiple webinars. So that
I think it's pretty
kind of the reason for
astonishing.
the question.
Once upon a time, I remember thinking with iTunes and things like that, everybody can be a song publisher. And now we're at the point where everybody can be a TV station owner, a station group owner. You can put up as many. This is an amazing time we're living in, Sky.
So yesterday, Sam said he did a theatrical experience where he brought the actors in to Skype and then Skyped that one single channel into a Zoom meeting. And that way he had separate, different controls, also managed the expectations of the different participants in the experience. So I get, again, you're getting 2 different account concepts, but that was a management control thing that is an option.
Yeah. Well, this whole Zoom webification of the world is creating all sorts of new possibilities that are very exciting. I mean, that's why we're here. We're all here because of this new possibility. And so who knows where it's all going to go. Let's move on through the rest of the questions. Next
Utah.
Next one's coming in from Larry Littlehale in Concord, North Carolina. What are the group suggestions for securely holding a Galaxy tab on top of a photographic tripod? Note, main use, rear-facing camera for online conference calls.
Oh, big subject. TJ, you start with it.
If you do a search on like Amazon for tablet holder, you'll see things of this nature, which are made to actually be attached to a tripod. Basically, you need something with a 1/4-20 or 3/8 thread mount on it. Roscoe also posted a link to something in Mukana, similar type of thing. And I know, Bill, you actually use a similar thing to this to hold your iPad.
I do. It's from you, Lindsay. And what I found is that the most important thing is that as the devices have grown, you need to be wary of, are you going to mount it horizontally or vertically? And what's that maximum vertical distance that you have to clamp well? Often also in Ulanzi, the one that I had sells a plastic version and a metal version. The metal versions are obviously a lot more stable, but let's go around to other people. Let's do Chris Comfort, then Mickey, then Jeffrey.
Yeah, I had the same thing, Bill. Sorry, I have Ulanzi here, and this is the metal version, and it's heavy. It's so solid. I even have my case on here, and it's solid, and it's got a 1/4-20 here and a 1/4-20 down here. But they are heavy, so just be aware of that extra weight.
Mickey, go ahead.
I like this one from Joby. And this one is able to swivel as well so that you can hold the tablet in either vertical or horizontal.
Jeffrey Powers?
I'm trying to find it, but I have it. Oh, it's right here. Perfect. It's a company, it's off of Amazon. The cool thing about this is it not only holds your tablet on one side, the other side can hold a secondary device like a phone. And I'll put that link in the notes.
Nice. I also, I used to use a lot of stuff from a company called Ram Mounts, and one of their claims to fame is they make auto holders for people who are on the road a lot. I think they have a contract with a lot of police police departments for those laptops that have to sit there really stably so that officers can access information while they're on patrol. And I don't know that that's the only one who does that, but I know they have a whole system of mounts that mount everything from fishing rods in sport fishing outfits, and it's a giant universe of mounting options that's very stable. Greg Curta, ideas?
Well, no, I think the size, somebody brought up the size thing. That's really important. I got a 12.9 iPad when they first came out, and I put all my scores and sheet music and stuff in there. But at the time, there was nobody that made one for that size. The only one was this company called Club Caddy, and they were designed for golf carts. But they're really light, but they're a little bulky.
Yeah, I think that, every time Apple or somebody in the Android tablet or something comes out with a whole new size, they went for a little bit bigger, then suddenly the accessory mount people have to run and catch up. Let's do Chris and then Mickey again. Chris Comfort, go ahead.
Yeah, just one other thing to think about. I used to have a spring-loaded mount for this iPad, and I felt like the springs were so strong that they were almost putting too much pressure on the iPad itself and almost risking damage. So I like spring-loaded mounts. Just be careful of what you get, and don't be surprised if it's a little too much.
Yeah, it's amazing how thin they're making these devices. I mean, it's really no more than a screen with a little circuit board behind it. Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, other brands I would look at are onstage stands. They make great holders for tablets and phones that are, of course, designed to go on different kinds of stands. And also check out Film Tools. They have great stuff there.
Two brands I've had a lot of luck with as well over the years. All right, let's move on. And we're still a little bit light on the questions thing, so do think about those questions and pop them in. It'll be a good day to get things answered. We have a lot of time between now and when education comes in. Oh, and I didn't mention it before the show started, but if you're going to have a question for education, after you post your question, look at the interface you're working with, and you can tag it for second hour. Today is the education second hour, so if you just tag it with second hour, you don't have to write education in, and we will hold off on answering those until our teacher panel of experts gets here a little later. Continue. Go ahead and pop into it.
Next one's coming in from Victor Kahia from Brookings, South Dakota. When starting a color grading workflow, what are the high-level first steps a new editor should take to avoid complete failure?
Okay, let's let Charles do it first, and then I'll do a little bit after that. Go, Charles.
So I don't know what editor you're using, Victor, but the first things that I would figure out is what footage I'm getting, where it's coming from, what it was shot in, log, Arri, Sony, whatever, and what is your delivery specs. And then based on that, you can build your pipeline to be as non-destructive as possible. Now, I'm not that familiar in Final Cut, but in Resolve, I would, let's say, for example, I have a project right now where I got a lot of footage from a bunch of families. They shot it on DSLRs and some iPhones and on some higher end cameras. And I brought in all the clips. I used what is called a color space transform that is standard in DaVinci. And I moved everything from what it was shot in, that color space, into a color space that I want to work with, which is usually more like an Alexa log C, which is more a filmic type of space. Then I will have all my color grading done in that space. And my last node, whether it's in the clip or in the timeline, I set it to my delivery specs. So if it's 709, I set it to 709. If it's P3, if it's HDR, it's a little bit of a different workflow, but those will be my main things. Figure out where the footage is coming from, what it was shot in, and then figure out what I'm delivering to. After that, you can figure out all the semantics in between.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good overview of the process. In Final Cut Pro 10 specifically, I look at it as two things. First, a base grade, which I do, and it's a little bit about what Charles talked about. You're going to be getting things from all manner of different devices that might have different color profiles, different encodings, different codecs that they used. So the first step for me is to use a function in Final Cut called Open Clip that takes the clip itself as an individual asset, opens it up, and allows you to apply a base grade on that. Now, for me, the base grade might be, it was shot in RAW, and I want it to be visible without all that milky RAW look, so I might apply a base grade to it that's just a simple LUT that is designed by whatever manufacturer, maybe the Canon LUT, that takes it from RAW and puts it into a Rec 709 color space that everybody can look at and enjoy working with. So that first thing is the Open Clip base grade. I'm also at the same time going to make sure that the brightness levels, the luminance values are correct. I'm going to do a basic color grade to make sure that skin tones look good, because when you send out a review thing, nobody wants to look like they're an alien. Everybody wants skin tones to be reasonable. When that happens and the base grade is done in open clip, everything that I drag into the timeline is going to be at least reasonable. Then you're moving toward specific looks that you can apply later to make something look interesting. Like we're talking about jazz music as one of the things. So we may want to have a more colorful, saturated, moody look for that. That would go later in the chain. So first process, get everything looking the same so you can cut everything reasonably, and then look at the more creative looks grades. Go ahead, Victor.
So in this case, and I'm going to use the case of the band, what can the members, as they're recording their own ISOs, do to make your job easier as far as grading when you're going to do it?
Well, the only thing I would suggest is, most people are not going to be shooting raw, which means that if their luminance values, if their exposure is correct, if their color balance is reasonable, it doesn't have to be perfect, because we have a good little bit of latitude these days to move color spaces and move colors around. But what you don't want to turn in is something that has just like a big murky with a few little highlights in it. We're going to have to push that out to open up the background if we want the background. You don't want things that are desperately out of color space. I mean, I used to shoot when I was younger and shooting a lot. You'd get under like sodium vapor lights and you would get this scene back that was it had almost no color spectrum at all except for a very narrow band. And you can't take that kind of footage and expand it out. Most cameras today, iPhones, webcams even, the color space is decent. So just make sure you have reasonable light on your subject. Try not to make any radical changes with your camera, because you don't want to paint in the camera. You want to allow that to be done later in the process, and you should be fine. It's gotten easier, actually. Lauren?
Oh, great. Given this particular audience, which is members of this group, I think we'll be okay as far as what we deliver.
Be absolutely fine, yeah. Lawrence, go ahead, then Mickey.
Victor, another tip I can give you is make sure that everybody is shooting in the same frame rate. It's not non-color related, but if you, I know everybody in this group
we have established.
Make sure you have the right frame rates. Otherwise, your sync and post will be challenging.
Yes, we have established 2997, 48, and H64, 1920. So thank you, but that has been established.
Mickey and then Sky.
So yeah, to make it easier for the colorists, like of course, like garbage in, garbage out. So proper, nicely shot footage, good lighting. Don't pop up the ISO way too much, stuff like that. And then moving on, file management. With the music video, you're probably not going through rolling edits that have to be reconformed multiple times, which typically happens for TV productions and also narratives, wherein the colorist is moving while they're still cutting stuff. So, but in case you have to go that route where there are multiple revisions on the cut, you want to maintain absolute perfect file management, because you're going to have to supply new material to the colorist as they are recorded or added in. And then moving on from that, keep the colorist informed on every single clip's color space, as Charles mentioned, because especially say if you're doing HDR, you really have to be on top of what color space each clip is, because you're gonna, again, as Charles mentioned, transform that into the same level playing field, so it's easier to work with. And then track organization. You want to, as much as possible, maintain all your main cuts on the first level of video. Above that, VFX, if you have any VFX. Above that, any lower thirds graphics, text. So you want to make sure everything on each track is the same kind of material. And there's probably a lot more, but not enough. There's probably a whole second hour on that.
I will note for Mickey that we've kind of gone past that in Final Cut. There is no track, and we use a thing called roles to assign an identity to each clip, and it doesn't really matter where it is in the hierarchy of clips. You can specify that this is these are the headshots and whatever, and it can dynamically move around through tracks while keeping a sense of what a clip is. It's a different way of thinking, but generally for 90% of video editors, track assignment is still incredibly important. Sky?
And sorry, in terms of that, like if you are collaborating with others, like, you know, Final Cut has its own system of doing things, but that system won't necessarily translate always to other systems. And being able to collaborate, you're gonna have to, you know, work on a specific standard that a lot of NLEs and coloring applications understand.
Yeah, we do that through the export process. Final Cut takes roles and maps them to the track order or hierarchy that the colorist needs, and then takes the audio and maps that to what the audio person needs, as opposed to living within that structure in your NLE, in Final Cut as you work on it. It just gives us, it likes giving us the option to work how we want to work and put tracks where we want them, so they're adjacent to things that they make sense with. Like, I don't want the video on track 90 to have audio on track -90, so that I have to shuffle between that. 10 looks at it like, you're working on these two things together. Why don't you just bring them together so you can see them both adjacent to each other, and then let the roles database split them out 180 tracks apart for the person who's going to want that. So anyway, Sky, go ahead.
Well, apparently we're going to be editing this in Final Cut. There's that answer. So we're learning things. Charles apparently will be handing it off to you into Resolve, which is a nice handoff. So many
10
things
and Resolve work well together.
They do brilliantly. So we're going to be learning many things, and this is where Lawrence and Chris come in as creative artists and designers. The two different looks that Victor is giving us, the close-up camera with the entire gray screen, or the wide cam with all the tchotchkes and the stuff, stylistically, if we're looking at a blues/big band thing. The two things that I noticed when I was handed the footage previously was, fortunately, they had at least a 30-degree option. So when I had a choice of the two different cameras that both Victor and Grant gave me for the Christmas thing, I could then choose a side shot or a straight-on-ish shot. But again, the backgrounds were neutral. That wasn't what we wanted. So I guess I'm looking to our artists in residence here from a creative design. Would you want, like Charles has, a ubiquitous background, or do you want it complicated and crunchy so there's
Go on over to Discord and start dropping some questions like that. I think it's we are up for having that discussion. Again, in our case, I think simplicity is always going to be in good taste.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure if I'll be excited or upset if we get 6 cameras per player.
No, you probably won't
two.
get 6,
Overhead,
but you might get 2.
just two.
That would be absolutely fine, Victor.
And at a 30-degree, and the second one's at least a 30-degree angle, please. Otherwise, we could.
Okay, I think we've had fun. I think a lot of us are looking forward to this project. Hopefully we can come up with something that will help a lot of people learn a lot of cool things and also be enjoyable to watch. So we'll see. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question for everybody.
All right. Next one's coming in from Lawrence in Hermosa Beach. I have noise reduction in my audio hijack chain and Zoom background suppression on low in Zoom. How do they affect or interfere with each other? Any recommendations?
Okay, who are audio hijack folks here? How many people are running it? And so John raised his question, then we'll go to Greg after that. John, go ahead.
I'm just going to make a very simple statement. Mickey told me to turn mine off.
to stop using audio hijack entirely?
Well, to turn off the noise suppression in audio hijack.
Okay. All right. Greg, you want to do more than that? And we'll go to Lawrence after that.
Yeah, well, I have RX-7 in my chain, but it's at the lowest possible setting, so it's just taking out the computer fan noise, and that's it. I don't know if you can turn off that internal Zoom thing at all. I think low is the lowest you can get it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it just has low, medium, and high, right? It's just something real simple like that.
Yeah, Mickey might know.
Let's go to Lawrence, and we'll close up with Mickey, and Mickey can. Oh, and then Victor's in. Okay. Lawrence, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm asking because of during mic check, Mickey was mentioning that my denoiser was too aggressive. But I think the one in how do you hijack, there is a learn button, right? That kind of picks the noise floor. So I set this normally midday when my fans are running and there is noise. That's when I had the audio hijack learning the denoiser. But in the morning, when I come in and everything's still, just started my computer and it's still, not hot in the house, it's probably too aggressive for that. So I was wondering if it's better to deactivate denoise and audio hijack and rely on the Zoom one.
Mickey?
Yeah, what I would suggest, if like you are unable to constantly monitor what it's actually doing, I wouldn't use a third party denoiser and just use, like, I think there's auto in Zoom. Because the denoisers, it's really something you need to pay attention to, because they could get super aggressive, they could be not enough, and things, as you mentioned, change throughout time. So you really have to be monitoring what it's doing.
Victor?
I'll speak to this for recording more than live, but using denoisers a couple of different times very gently can make a huge difference. So a couple of passes rather than one aggressive pass that are very gentle can make a real nice, subtle difference.
What a great tip. Thank you. And Greg, same thing?
Yeah, I second that, and also that holds true for things like compression as well. But the other thing is that if you put original sound on, I don't think that totally negates all of the noise reduction features. I think it drops it down to low. I could be wrong about this, but from what I read, I couldn't find anything that said it turns it off.
Interesting. Okay. Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and move on. I know I came away from that little discussion. I never thought. I always try to use the control to do the job I need. The idea of doing half the job with a control, then putting another instance and doing maybe half the job and getting a better result that way is a whole new way of thinking for me. So thank you for that. I learned something what could be very important for me. Let's go ahead back to the questions. Move on.
Next one's coming in from David Brady in New York. He's asking, is it possible to run multiple instances of Zoom Room virtualized using VMware? Anyone know of any supported multi-input SDI cards that work with Zoom, Magewell, AJA, BMD? Note, bringing SDI in as camera is the goal.
Okay. Well, do we have any workflow Zoom video workflow VMware architects experts? We may have trouble with this. I'm not recognizing any of the folks on the panel who normally answer questions of this type. But Guy, do you have some
I'll take a stab at it. I'd imagine
good.
that you can, but I think that card isn't going to be able to slice and dice and be available to, if it's in one box, be available to multiple VMwares. I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it works, is once one latches onto it, it's not going to allow the other ones.
So you may need a multiple computers running multiple card solution if you want to do that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I've got one pretty close to running on Azure in the cloud too. That's another way of doing this if you're just trying to make it lightweight, and I'm really, really close. It's just some RDP thing where you can adjust the mic. The last piece of the puzzle I just have is to get the mic working, and I'm using VB audio cables, and that's not seeing it. But once I get that cracked in the code, I'll throw it in the Zoom Discord. So if you want to pay attention in there, David, there might be some other ideas as how to do this.
Okay,
in a
Mickey,
different
and
way.
then we'll finish up with John Pruitt. And we'll go through John and get to Jeffrey Powers. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, in terms of getting the picture into the different VMs, I agree with Guy. I don't think it's going to chop it up and be able to be seen by each VM. But a workaround could possibly be VMix or OBS sending multiple NDI streams out, and each VM capturing different NDI sources. Just a thought.
John?
Yeah, if you had multiple capture cards, you could attach each one to a separate VM, so you wouldn't need multiple machines. But VMs tend to latch on to hardware and not share them, so that's going to be your big issue there.
And Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, but the cool thing is you can actually, if you're running your own VMware sessions from your rack system, you can also get a rack that you can put a whole bunch of capture cards into and then assign them as you go.
Nice. Okay. I think we've at least danced around that as well as we can for today. And if these things don't work out and you don't on one of the bigger daily days, particularly on when do we normally do video? We used to do it on Wednesday. I don't know if we have still more people coming in on Wednesday who are video specific engineering types, but that might be a good comeback to get even additional help if you need it. Let's go ahead, Guy. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Florian. He says, yesterday you mentioned to screen share the Atem Mini via Quicktime to Zoom. Great tip. Unfortunately, my company chose Microsoft Teams on Windows PCs. I am struggling using my Atem Mini with Teams as a webcam to share video and slides, e.g. via a connected iPad in high quality in Teams calls. Tips?
And it looks like Mickey popped his hand up. Mickey, you got
Yeah,
experience
I'm
there?
just curious if Florian can pop in the chat and mention exactly what he or she is struggling with in terms of connecting it to Teams.
I think the answer to that is management, which is its own discussion. But yeah, if it sounds like it would be beneficial to have a few more details about what's frustrating you about this, or at least your rig and setup. Jeffrey, did you want to pop in and?
I'd like to go back to that last question for a quick second, because I actually found I did one quick search and I found that Magewell has a card out there. I don't know if they have SDI versions, but they have HDMI versions, multi-cards that have the software that can actually do individual instances of to each VMware.
Oh, nice. Okay. So hopefully whoever asked the question is still watching and will pick up that additional note. TJ, go ahead.
Well, I'm wondering, to Florian's question here, is if the Teams software is not allowing a high quality signal to come through. You should be getting a 1080p signal from the Atem, from your iPad into your Atem, but I just wonder if the signal going to other participants in Teams is sufficient resolution to allow a nice, crisp display of the slide or the video.
Yeah,
I
we've all
suspect
experienced.
Maybe it's not.
We've all experienced, even in Zoom, that initially coming in, we got reasonably low resolution video, and it was we danced through a lot of hoops, learning things like adding different devices, or I know Guy's done a ton of work in terms of how to interface with the Zoom folks to get additional resolution passed along, but it wasn't the default. The default was most of us who came in to Zoom initially got pretty low resolution as they were struggling with this huge influx of people who wanted to do Zoom calls daily, and they were trying to divide up the available bandwidth among literally tens and then hundreds of millions of people. Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, and with my limited experience with Teams, I think that Teams pretty much tries to, if it receives like say a 1080p source, it tries to eat up as much bandwidth as it possibly could and push the highest quality it can out, but it automatically adapts to like lower quality connections and brings the resolution down.
John Pillard? You're still struggling with your mouse to find the button. Yep, you almost got it. There you go.
Yep. I was going to say the one thing that's unique about Teams versus Zoom is the admin has a lot more control over the quality and bandwidth, as I understand it. And our admins have really lowered the bandwidth to try to save on it, and they've even disabled it for some cases. So
Florian may have a problem with just his administration or whoever his hierarchy is having to go through there to let them know that his use case does require, I mean, if he's doing video and slides, his use case would be a higher level of data throughput than maybe one of the administrative assistants who isn't doing that kind of work. So maybe inside the company, they have to rebalance that. All right, I think we're ready to move on from that.
Next one's coming in from our friend Dan here on the panel from Erie, Pennsylvania. It says, tried doing Alex's Keynote lower thirds, but in OBS. Using luma key filter, I see black pixels around my lower thirds. What am I doing wrong?
Ooh, this is going to be technical. And too bad Alex isn't here because he's an expert in the edges of keys and alpha channels and how that works. I know only the bare minimum of it, and without some kind of alpha channel aware software, the number of levels between white and black, which is what things usually key something out with against the background, you end up getting a lot of stair-steppy and not very good key edges. But is that the problem? Dan, do you want to
Yeah,
pop in?
that's the thing I'm seeing. I don't see it obviously in OBS, but as soon as I bring it in as a camera into Zoom, I see like a little pixely stuff.
Yeah, and so they might be just using a simple 8-bit key where they have only 256 levels of black to gray to work with, and it's not doing a very clear edge. The whole idea of an alpha channel is to allow transparency, and the better alpha channels have a lot of transparency levels so they can ramp between the edge of a letter and the background smoothly and believably. Mickey, do you have your hand up for a second there?
Yeah. Dan, how are you getting the Keynote into OBS?
As an image, I believe.
So were you just outputting a PNG or something? Oh, PNGs have, I think, transparency, but are you outputting
Yeah, I'm out, maybe as a JPEG. Maybe I
Okay.
export
Yeah.
the.
Yeah. Okay, so you're not doing a live key coming out of Keynote going into
I don't know if you can
OBS.
do that in. I don't know if you can do that in OBS.
Yeah,
But
I'm not familiar either. But yeah, if ever you are exporting a JPEG, I would probably try to switch to if you're doing a Luma key and you're not pre-multiplying it, probably want to do a TIFF or
okay.
some other higher quality
Yeah, TIFF or a
format.
PNG or
PNG.
something that carries transparency with
No,
it.
but
'Cause-
he's doing what do you call this? He's doing a Luma key though, so he doesn't need transparency. But yeah, to that point, since you're just exporting images, yeah, why not export PNG? Then you don't even have to do any keying in OBS.
Lawrence had his hands up, and Charles did, and Greg did. So let's. Oh, you're okay, Lawrence?
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm second what Mickey said. So do it as a PNG, and you don't have to key anything.
Okay, then we'll do Charles, Greg, and TJ. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, Dan, could you put up that graphic again? I was trying to look at the edges in the past. I don't know much about OBS, but in the past, I've had a similar slight film edge when going between a straight fill and a pre-multiplied fill. Now that might, I don't know if you have control over that, but looking at this on my screen, it still feels a little soft. So, and that's not in any way in your graphic, right?
Oops, you're muted, Dan.
Yeah.
I guess I could share the OBS screen too, but yeah, it's not as soft as that.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
What graphics program are you using to draw the actual graphics? Because this is how dumb I am sometimes.
Yeah.
I've realized after I've created 100 graphics that I had a make edges soft command turned on or something like that when I actually made them. So it was entirely dumb user error in my case.
Yeah, I'm using Keynote, and I'm just that's a logo, and then I just
So there's no shadowing turned on in Keynote.
Yeah, and I just thought that I just wanted to play with it with OBS. Really, is what I wanted to learn, and so I wanted to see what the best way to get a lower third in OBS was, and I was just messing around.
Let's go to
with it.
Greg and TJ and see if we can get some more different kinds of answers. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I mean, can't you just build a bunch of lower thirds, and then bring them into the scene in OBS, and just lay them on, shrink the window down, lay them on top as you need to. That's how I've done it.
Yeah, I guess I was really just trying to follow what I'm not having an Atem Mini, so I was just trying to follow what he was doing.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have an Atem Mini either. I did all the switching in and out in OBS.
Yeah.
Well, let's get some ideas from TJ and then Mickey.
Dan, did I understand you correctly? You exported that as a JPEG out of Keynote, or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, because I've watched videos on lower thirds for OBS, and they say to get an image, and bring it in. And
Okay, so what you are seeing there then, if that is actually a JPEG, is you are seeing anti-aliasing between the edges of the colors. JPEG is a lossy compression, and so if you have a line of white and a line of black, 1 pixel wide next to each other, depending on your level of compression, the JPEG compression will start to mush those two together, and the pixels, you won't have a line of white and a line of black anymore. You'll have 2 lines of gray. And so what you are seeing is the anti-aliasing happening around there. And so it's not pure black right next to the white. It starts to become a degraded gray. And when you're doing a luma key, it's expecting that pure black, and it's not pure black. Now it's a gray. And so you may have to adjust your luma key up higher to include more of the grays. I don't even know if you can do that in OBS, but to knock out more of the grays. But a PNG has no compression. A TIFF has no compression. So one of those formats, you'll have nice clean lines between the two.
Okay, let's speed things up a little bit. But Mickey, Lawrence, and then Jeffrey, and we'll finish up on this.
So yeah, Dan, if you don't have to do any like live animation and actually pulling the image, the graphics straight out of Keynote Live, then I would just export a PNG so that you don't have to deal with any keying anymore. It will come in as an image into OBS that's already has transparency.
Lawrence? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I jumped the gun.
Yeah, please go ahead, Lawrence.
Okay, Lawrence, and then Jeffrey. Go ahead,
So
Lawrence.
here is an interesting thing about exporting images from Keynote. JPEG, you cannot have a slider with the quality in Keynote. They added high quality JPEG a few versions ago. So you have low quality JPEG, high quality JPEG. In my findings, even the high quality JPEG are still too compressed for me, and there's artifacts. So I always export PNGs, even if I don't need transparency. And I would, if you want to convert them in JPEGs, do it in another program. I don't like the Keynote export to JPEG.
There you go. That's helpful. Jeffrey, you want to finish things up and we'll move on?
Lawrence just answered it. I was going to say if you have to do JPEG, then get it to the highest quality possible, but the PNG is the best answer.
Very cool. All right, let's move on. Guy, you're up.
Alrighty, thanks. Rick has a question in from South Bend, Indiana. He says, how do you apply bias voltage to make the Pyle headsets work? Currently going into a USB sound card to a PC.
So bias voltage is a very, very small voltage that some electric condenser mics need, and it's just like sometimes I think it's somewhere between 3 to 5 volts normally. I might be wrong about that, but it's pretty small. It's not like 48 volt phantom power. It's different things. You can get bias voltage injectors out there, but let's have Greg and then Mickey talk about specifics.
Yeah, I think the easiest way is to grab this VXLR Plus from Rode. You can. I know exactly where you could probably get it too.
In Steiker,
like
Norway, or
maybe. And what that will do is that will allow you to use phantom power, and that particular one changes the phantom power into the bias voltage that you can use. Now, I'm assuming that you have an XLR input on your USB interface.
Okay, Mickey?
Yeah, exactly what Greg. I was going to mention the exact same thing. That's probably the easiest and cheapest way to get that done. Again, assuming you have XLR on your interface and not just like a mini jack connection.
So basically, it's a step-down transformer that'll take 48 volt phantom power and move it into 3.5 volts or whatever it is for the condenser mic power. All right, moving on. Next question, Guy.
Next one's coming in from Tony in Missouri. He's asking USB-C, Thunderbolt, USB-C with Thunderbolt. Can someone explain the differences and the uses in order to guide purchases of audio video equipment, docks, adapters?
I'm sitting here wondering, could they made this any more difficult? Let's take the same connector, put it in 7 different things with 3 different bands and 2.1 and 2. Let's start with TJ. We're going to Jeffrey, Mickey, and John. Go ahead, TJ.
USB-C is the connector. That's all it is. It's the connector that is built to deliver power and data over the same connector. Thunderbolt and USB 2, USB 3, etc., are protocols that define how much data can be pushed through the wire.
And there are little symbols that denote, Sky is holding up a thing, and you can see a Thunderbolt sign on there. So that is Thunderbolt. It gets complicated because they can look the same and have different standards that they pass. Go ahead. Who is next? Greg and then TJ. Oh, no, I'm sorry, not Greg and TJ. It's Jeffrey and then, Jeffrey and then Mickey.
Thunderbolt is a licensed technology, so if you're not paying for it, you're not putting it into a computer, and it's a consortium, but it's mostly I think Intel started it, and I'm not sure who technically owns the Thunderbolt protocol right now, but if you don't pay for it, it's not going to go into the thing. So you have the other option of USB-C. This is also a unified single plug, so we don't have thousands of different plug configurations, so you don't have to go hunting for cables for whatever you need. You just need to have a Thunderbolt versus a USB-C cable.
Yeah, I think it was originally somewhere between Intel and Apple. I think Apple designed it, but Intel was a partner in it, so who knows who owns it at this point. Mickey?
Yeah, TJ pretty much said what I was going to say. USB-C is only the actual physical connector that goes into the port. And you can have multiple protocols running through that type of connector. One thing to add, though, is that different cables support different protocols. So say if you want to run Thunderbolt, you have to get a Thunderbolt 3, you have to get a cable that's specific to Thunderbolt 3. A regular USB-C cable will not run Thunderbolt.
And to add insult to injury, there are some cables that can be Thunderbolt 3, and it might be a 20 megabit per second rated cable. And then there's another one for 40 megabits per second. So if you have a big payload that has to go down it, you have to pay attention to those things. John Pruitt is going to finish this up here.
Just add two final points, and that is that some Thunderbolt cables are fiber optic, in addition to there being copper wire Thunderbolt cables. So the fastest ones are going to be fiber optic, so you got to be careful about that. And then finally, there are a bunch of junk USB-C cables out there. A couple of years ago, an engineer from Google used his 20% time to basically test that the stuff he ordered off of Amazon worked, and a large number of them didn't. So my thing to you is, when you're ordering USB-C cables, not necessarily Thunderbolt cables, they don't seem to have quite the same level of problems, is use your judgment, go with a brand you've used in the past, and don't cheap out. Don't get the least expensive cable. Get the second or third least expensive.
John, quickly define your 20%. That's a critical comment, because that's an IBM origin concept, isn't it? And what does that mean?
I've only heard about it from Google, and that was they were allowed to use 20% of their work day or their work hours for projects that they wanted to do themselves.
I'd heard that was a 10% concept from IBM, so I was just curious. All good ideas come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And hopefully evolve and get better and better. The thing about USB-C and Thunderbolt for me is that I realized that in the spec, when we started moving over, that can carry up to 100 watts of power. And I thought that's a big game changer, which is why you're suddenly seeing why we did on Mac laptops. We went away from a specific power connector to the fact that USB-C could deliver enough power to charge the batteries in your laptop at the same time. There are some vague rumors that they may be going back to some form of MagSafe dedicated charger, but I know some people are very happy about that. And I was of two minds about it. I mean, in one sense, MagSafe was fabulous in terms of, I was silly, I didn't realize the extension cord on my laptop at the location shoot was something that somebody could run into and drag my laptop off. So that was the best part of MagSafe. But when they combine power and data, I'm not sure I want the data MagSafing off in the middle of a backup or transfer or something like that. So I always thought there was a blessing and a curse to that, but that's just me. Let's move on to the next question. Go ahead, Guy.
Next one's coming in from our friend TJ in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He says, most humans lose high-frequency hearing as they age. For you sound guys, what happens if your hearing starts to degrade? Are you just forced to start a new career?
You don't tell anybody. You fake it. No.
What was that?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Audiologists will tell you that human hearing does diminish in the high end. There are things you can do, but let's talk to Greg about it because she's an audio expert.
Yeah, for the first thing, I really, really want to thank TJ for bringing this up. This is a real... we don't think about that at all, actually, quite frankly. No, that it is an issue. I think fortunately for me, I can still work because I don't really deal a lot with any of that over 10K, air stuff too much. It's really important in music, I know, and there's there's a lot of mixers. I've really only gotten busted on it once, and that's I had a young protege one time, and he said, "What is that really high pitched whine in there?" And I said, "Oh, good idea. You caught that, did you? Very good, excellent job. Now, can you fix it?" And he fixed it, and we continued on. And guess who that was?
Mickey, you're next.
Exactly what Greg said. Like a lot of at least the frequency range that most of us work in terms of, especially in terms of film, post sound as opposed to music, lies below 10K. So it's something I used to be paranoid about, and luckily, now I can still hear clearly up to 14K and a bit into the 16K range. But yeah, most of the work that we do is below 10K. So I'm not too worried about that, I guess, in the future. And yeah, something exactly what Greg said, it was in the ambience, I believe, Greg, that there are some library checks that have something up there, in the 16K range that at that time it was super annoying to me, that high-pitched whine. And yeah, hopefully when I do eventually lose my hearing in that upper range, I will be working with someone who would call that out as well.
And a lot of us who've been in this for a long time, one of the things we tell people is you've got ears and you need to use them. You've also got scopes and you need to use them. In some cases, if you've got something that's a borderline signal and you know how to read scopes and you constantly put them on there, maybe you will see some energy in a frequency that you're not quite as good as identifying, and at least be able to ask someone else. I mean, sometimes the wisdom of knowing the right tool to work with at the right time can help with this. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I agree. The visuals, having the visuals there with the audios, you start seeing the matrix in those lines, and you'll see when something's hitting a little bit high. I remember a few years ago that we were mixing in for a band, and the sound mixer, he was spot on. But he had a hearing aid, and he was having a hard time hearing things. He used his scopes to tune in the band into the room. And he was hearing seeing something in the 6,000 range that needed to be fixed. I think it was one of the guitar player. No, it was keyboard player. And he went, and then they found out it was a bad line in the cable, and he got it all fixed. So you could do it visually just as easily.
Also, notice when your dog gets up and leaves the room. That might be a problem. All right, we're going to keep moving on here. Go ahead, Guy.
Next one's coming in from Ron in West Michigan. He's saying, I keep seeing this Nureva audio system being pitched for small to large conference rooms. Has anyone experienced this in real life yet versus a marketing demo?
Nureva for conference room audio. Anybody have any experience with that? I've never seen it. Did somebody want to look it up real quick on the internet? Or Greg has his hand up. Greg, have you run into these?
Actually, I haven't. Not that I know anything about it. I did look it up.
It's a sound bar.
It looks interesting. Well, they have a whole new system that they call this what is it? Something mist, sound mist or mic mist or something, and it's a way of combining mics into focus areas. Not different from the beam technology. We've all seen that, but it looks interesting. I can't find a demo anywhere. So I haven't heard it.
That'd be interesting. Well, I guess we'll have to do a little more. The answer is no one has direct experience with it here on the panel, but we find it interesting. I will say that, whenever speaker systems say they can mystify sound or anything else, I just remember that they all still have to follow the laws of physics generally. And so the inverse square principle and distance is still going to work and all those things. Oh, great. Our educators are coming in. We're almost there. Let's zip through these last ones.
All right, let's grab this one from Hasmuk. He says, in Zoom as host, I make someone co-host. How do I relieve them of that newfound status?
Can you take them off of co-host? I don't think I've ever tried to do that, but does anybody know? Mickey?
So yeah, the same way you co-host someone, wherein you click on their menu, like either on the photo and gallery view or in the more menu within the participants panel, there is an option there to withdraw co-host.
Withdraw? Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's there. Next question.
Next one's coming in from Tony. I am looking at a simple, inexpensive Behringer mixer. It has, quote, British EQs, unquote. Can someone explain what this means and whether one would want this or want to avoid this feature?
It was a marketing thing for a long time in audio that those, what are the SSL consoles? I can't remember. One of the great consoles came from that part of the world, and everybody lauded that British EQ sound in a period, maybe the 60s or 70s. Let's get both Greg and Mickey. Let's start with Greg real quick, and let's get these knocked out.
Yeah, there's a lot of manufacturers that still maintain that Soundcraft is another one. It really is a question of where they put their frequency points that the EQ operates. Okay, so they have figured out, certain ranges. American systems are usually at 100, maybe 2K or I don't know, 2 to 3, 5K, something in there, and like 10K on the top end. British is a little more compact. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers are, but they've picked different numbers that they want as their center frequencies. So it gives a little bit of different color.
So that would be the narrower Q. Is it sometimes discussed in audio?
No, not the Q. It's the frequency that is the center of the pot.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So it's not the spread out.
No, it's where that center frequency is. Is it to be had or to be avoided? It depends if you like it. I like it.
Okay.
So,
Mickey, you want to add something real quick before we move on? No?
Greg
Okay.
got it.
Greg got it. Okay, we're moving to the next question.
Next one's coming in from Edward in Belmont, MA, what is that? Massachusetts. Question. A couple of weeks ago, you suggested face mics, also known as head-worn mics, for Zoom. Most choices were under $200. Are there any face mics that are more affordable, even with skin tone?
There is a beige skin tone. I mean, the world of skin tones is very wide, but I did notice about a week ago that the Pyle mics, the original ones that were extremely affordable that we saw that did a good job, were back on Amazon. So PYLE is a possibility for that. Let's go really quickly, TJ and Roscoe, and then I think we're going to move on because we're getting close to educator time and we don't want to make them wait too much.
The guest the other day mentioned taking specific markers and coloring the microphones to match somebody's skin so you can get it dialed right in. They do that on Broadway a lot.
Roscoe?
I put 2 links in Mukana to both the Pyles and the Polsons.
Excellent. Those are the 2 brands that we got real good results with in the early days of office hours. Moving on.
Next one's coming in from Hasmuk. Using Zoom Room in current production to get 720p. Mic and camera for Zoom Room attendee. Is that where Zoom Remote app is running?
Anybody know about Zoom Rooms? Guy, you're pretty good at that. Do you know anything about this?
I'm trying to wrap my mind around the question. Mics and camera for Zoom Room attendee. So you can add any mic or any camera to a Zoom Room. In our conference room, we have a really nice Lumens PTZ camera and a what Chris Fenwick would call a bat phone. It's a really beefy conference room phone, and those are picked up by the Zoom Room, and that's traditionally how a Zoom Room would be used. But you could use any, Brio, any let's say Polson with a TechRise if you want to go that simple. And then the Zoom Remote app, typically that's on a controller, and it's an iPad or an Android device. In our case, in our conference room, we use one of these Polycom phones. But you can also now, with the latest update, launch the controller via the web, which is really cool. So then you can do all of the controls that you would have, everything from choosing that camera to PTZ control through the app on the web. So remotely, anybody can pin, they can spotlight, they can co-host, they can unco-host, they can do all that control via the web portal. But you have to be an admin. So
Okay, let's kick out these last two real quick. We've got one from Tony and then Steve Bauer over in the queue, and then we'll go to vetting or setting levels on the education panel.
Alrighty, Tony from Missouri asks, I came into possession of a line mixer. It has 4 inputs and an output. It has 4 dials. What types of devices are these used for, and what should they not be used for?
A line mixer that has 4 inputs and 1 output. So is this something like the old Shure? Often they should be marked though. Normally you'd get channel 1, 2, 3 and master out or something like that. But Greg, you want to take a shot at it, and then Mickey and then Roscoe, and real quick, guys.
Yeah, if it's something that I'm thinking of, typically it's like 4 1/4-inch inputs and 1 1/4-inch output, and the knobs are just the level. Okay,
that
so
is correct.
It's just quickly blending. Quickly blending 4 channels into one with no EQ or no anything else.
Yeah, actually, I use one of those little ones from Behringer to do that for a headphone mix. So, yeah, that may be what you're talking about. Go ahead, Roscoe, and then Mickey, real quick.
Yeah, he posted a model of it in Mukana, and that's exactly what it is, Greg. So it's used for just like the example they use is bars and clubs. If you want to run out to speakers and that kind of stuff.
Mickey?
Yeah, line mixers are typically low, not as high-end audio devices. They're typically just used for, say, monitoring, like having several sources come in, like say different headphone sources, set the levels of those and feed them out to a single output. A lot of line mixers are passive, and they're usually not good enough of a quality to use for, say, recording or your actual broadcast chain. It's good enough for just monitoring, just listening.
Yeah. Okay. And the last one of our non-EDU questions.
All right, last one here is from Steve Bauer in Seattle. Is there a USB cable such as Thunderbolt 3 or 4 that will handle Thunderbolt, USB 2, USB 3, power? In other words, one cable that can handle all the protocols, one size fits all.
Mickey?
At least in my experience, Thunderbolt 3, I guess Thunderbolt 4 cables can handle everything down, but the lower end cables can't handle higher end protocols.
Yeah, most of the time, if a cable handles the top spec of everything, it handles everything below that as well. It's not like when you reach Thunderbolt 3, you lose Thunderbolt 2 compatibility. They're generally fully backward compatible. TJ?
One thing to consider is Thunderbolt 3, 4 have a spec length that's only about 2 meters. They don't get any longer than that. So if you need something longer, you can't use a Thunderbolt cable. You need to get a higher quality USB 3 point whatever cable.
Yeah, there are active systems that you can extend those out that require power, isn't there? I don't do much with long Thunderbolt, but anyway, if somebody gives you a 10-foot cable or a 25-foot cable and says this is Thunderbolt 4, they're kind of not. All right, we are ready. Our friends are here from the world of education. We always look forward to this every Saturday. Saturday is kind of held out here on office hours to work with folks who are actively struggling with all the technological issues of this move to educate from home and remote learning and the new world as we see it. So we're going to have Mickey do a quick mic check on all of our educators and bring them in, and then we will start the discussion for this morning. Welcome, one and all. Go, Mickey.
Hey, welcome, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Please put your location here in Zoom, and on the meters, the goal is at -24 on the short term. Let's start off with Steve Cutton and then move on to Kent Kersey.
Hello. Hello and welcome to San Francisco Bay Area, where it's a little sunnier day than we had yesterday, which it was pretty much a rainy day, which we needed very much here. Looks like I need to come up just a little bit.
Give us 2 or 3 dB up.
Okay. All right, coming over to the mixer. And talk about this level and keep talking about that level. That should get me right around minus
Yes, sir.
24.
Thank you very much, Kent, and then Aaron.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. Looks like I might need to come up or go down a little bit, right? Okay, coming down. And so it might be too loud. Now, do I need to come back up again? All right, I'll come back up again. And I hope everyone is doing okay. And I'm coming up. All right, maybe we're in the right place right here. Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe you drop back down 2 or 3 dB.
Awesome.
Kent.
Will
Right,
do.
thank you very
Thanks.
much. Aaron, and then Chris Clark.
Good morning from Boston, where we have 1/8 of an inch of snow on the ground. That's about all I can handle at this time of year, and it finally got below 30.
All right, that's a good check. Thank you, Chris, and then Laura.
Good morning from Tempe, Arizona. Happy to see your smiling faces. Life is good. Cloudy and rainy, which is sort of ecotourism weather for us here in Southern Arizona. We're grateful for it, but we're confident that it's going to go away soon. How's that look, Mickey?
Chris, if you could just give us like 1 or 2 dB down, just a slight nudge down.
Will do. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Laura, and then Michael.
Good morning. It's been it's 58 degrees here in Texas and kind of overcast and wet.
Yeah, Laura, if you could give us a 2 or 3 dB down.
Yes, going down. See how that looks. Is it getting closer, Mickey?
Maybe another 1 or 2 down.
Okay, the slider's a little cantankerous here in Zoom.
Yeah, I think you're in the ballpark.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Michael and Tony Mobley.
Good morning from San Francisco, where I'm also looking forward to enjoying the weather today, and had a successful first week at classes, so that was nice to get back into the swing of things.
So yeah, if you could give us a maybe 3 dB up, Michael.
3 dB up. All right. Yeah, had a good first week of classes. It's going to be a super busy semester, but looking forward to spending the next hour with everyone.
Yeah, maybe just a one more
up.
dB
All
up.
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, and then Emily afterwards.
Good day, good afternoon, good morning, hello. I am coming in on the iPhone and the Atem Mini.
Yeah, yeah, Tony. So on the Atem, if you could give us a 2 clicks down on the level there.
That is 2 clicks down. The weather here is very cool, but the sun is shining very bright.
Excellent. All right, thank you, Emily.
Good morning, everyone, from a very cold Red Hook, New York, with wind gusts keeping it down in the singles and the teens. And Mickey, you're amazing. Your ear is just awesome.
Thank you. Well, speak for yourself. You're the flamingo chaired person here. So you're the awesome one.
It is always fabulous to have our educators come in on Saturday to talk about everything from their hopes to their challenges and the wide range in between. So is everybody back in school now? Has everybody kind of started? And let's just, maybe I'm going to pick on a couple of people that I know have special expertise. Aaron particularly is in the lower grade levels, so you're kind of our tap into the world of the little ones. How do you feel about how things are starting out for you this year?
So because I'm remote all year, that's our assignment. I'm with my kids, thankfully, until June. I know I've heard a lot of information from pals across my district that are, they're starting to get back into the routine and they're, trying to keep everybody safe. So, we're trying to use more technology and kind of lean on old practices to make it more balanced, but keep it consistent for the students.
Nice. Okay. Emily also works with a wider swath, but also the younger kids in some cases. So Emily, how do things look from your perspective?
It's interesting. We're getting back into the swing, and New York is pushing to open schools, at least in the hybrid model. So That means that kids are in 2 days a week, and then everybody's fully remote 1 day a week, and it flip-flops. The big news this week is, or not news, but discussion is statewide testing and whether or not they're going to go through with the 3-8 and the Regents test, which is a New York State test that they give all the high schoolers in order to graduate. And so there's been a lot of argument back and forth about whether or not we should be having testing or not, and what does it mean. And it's funny because I think I'm in one of those weird spots where I'm like, testing needs to happen in the sense of we need to benchmark the kids, but it has to have no stakes attached to it. Like, we need to know where the kids are, but it shouldn't come back on the teachers. It shouldn't come back on the students. It shouldn't come back on the districts. It's like, hey, this is where we're at. So now what's the game plan going forward? Because I think we really need to spend this spring and summer figuring out what we're going to do going forward to help our kids, make gains. And so I had a lot of interesting discussions this week about how are we going to do that. So that's where I am.
Fair enough. And I don't think, and I could be wrong about this, I know we have people who are at the top or higher level. I don't think anybody's at high school at this in the panel today. Michael's at the college level working on that. Michael, you mentioned a brief thing. You have anything else you want to add to it?
Yeah.
And then I'd like to hear from Lauren as well.
So Berkeley is a semester school. So most semester universities in the U.S. start, the sort of end start date is just after Martin Luther King holiday, which is just this past Monday. So we started, I think pretty much by that point, the quarter school started close to the beginning of the year. So almost everyone is back. And Berkeley's plans right now are fully remote as the main option. And they are tentatively allowing small group discussions to hold sessions on campus, mostly optionally, starting next month, if things continue to improve and with the requirement of testing. So my classes are much beyond that level, but I think everyone is looking forward to the chance to actually see some of their friends and colleagues.
Nice. And Laura, how are you? How is your part of the education world settling in here?
Well, we just finished a round of walk-ins trying to get the last set of the students registered for the semester. That is an absolute logistical nightmare, having all the advisors in one Zoom call with our front desk staff queuing them into our registration, into our note system, putting them into a designated waiting room, and then each advisor having their own breakout rooms. I will say that the Zoom update did make it a little easier. We could have 2 or 3 people with co-hosts being able to move. Now we could have 2 or 3 people helping move the students around, but it's still a logistical nightmare. And we're all just glad that as of the end of the day, Thursday, we are done with that process. We do that for the week before school starts through the last day to register.
So there's a lot of work on structuralizing the organization of classrooms and not classrooms, but classes across a virtual space. For the rest of the educators here, I forgive me if I've forgotten that anybody's active in the classroom daily, but are any other thoughts that have come past the rest of you that you would like to share with us this morning about how you see things developing out there? Tony, please.
So I don't want to put a damper on things, but I think it's important to mention that there are a couple of things going on here in Georgia. In the Cobb County school system, it has been revealed that there have been 3 teacher deaths based on COVID. And so there are some teacher protests that are going on here. And so things have not been ironed out because the state of Georgia is very interested in everyone being in school. And then, of course, the teachers are reluctant because of the COVID deaths. So it's an interesting thing, that's going on here. But I just thought it was important to mention that there are some areas of the country that are still struggling with COVID.
Thank you for bringing that up. You can't confront problems unless you're willing to talk about them, and I think that's very valuable for everybody to hear. That scares all of us, I know. Kent?
Yeah, I've been back and kind of doing the hybrid thing, which we all know we're huge fans of, right? And and so it's, I've been able to, I've just been doing sort of the philosophy of making it like a David Letterman or something, and you have a studio audience and then you have a home audience, and you do your best to address both of them. And so, I mean, it's been okay. And I also have a really small class of grad students and we're doing a small sort of seminar thing. And so that's been great, just being able to have 10 of us in a room sitting around a table talking about interesting ideas. And so, hopefully this is just a weird parentheses of a time, and it'll change back to whatever it is optimal soon.
I think you are speaking on behalf of millions upon millions of parents, educators, students, and everybody else who are hoping we can turn this corner and get on the best possible path. Because I know that really what you guys want to do is what you got into this to do, which is help kids make their way through life. So anybody see anything happening out there, been reading about anything that gives you an idea that maybe we're turning some little corners on some of this virtual model? Anybody, or do you think things are just kind of where they are and going to stay here for a while? Emily?
This week I got put on a statewide panel for a 3-year grant in New York that's looking at the future of technology in education for remote learning purposes, so that teaching in the remote learning environment becomes more sustainable and more influential on the students, like what's working, what's not working. I think it's like the $19 million of the COVID relief fund is going into this project that I'm working on, but at the same time, I'm like a little too late. But at the same, but it's going to happen in the future, and who knows with the variants, what might happen in the future, and how often are we going to be doing the flip flop. So I'm excited to be part of that, and that they're actually putting money into looking at that, and not just from the technology point of view. They're also looking at families. One section was like families with partners, as partners. Culturally responsive education was part of it. ELL students was part of it. So it's like they broke it out into 8 branches. I think there are like 8 different branches to the whole grant. And I just happened to be on the specific for technology, teaching teachers the technology that works. But there's also, a branch that's solely looking at the special ed side of things. And so that looks hopeful to me. Like if it, they follow through with the whole grant and actually do the work, it could be very useful going forward to making some of the things that we've learned from COVID and the shutdown, like the kids that don't want to be at school. There's a group of kids, a set group of kids who don't thrive in the socialization of school. And so if they were allowed to do it their own way or have another pathway, and that's something that comes out of this, I think that would be really helpful to us as a whole, a society as a whole.
That seems very exciting to me. So you're seeing little tiny things that we have experienced and had to confront here in this new era that you might take back when, please, hopefully, Erin's able to hug her little ones again in a classroom circumstance, but there are things that you might carry over from the lessons. Dan, speak to that or anything else you're interested in here.
Yeah, I'm positive for getting past this too. But even before COVID, at our university, it's a smaller university, and we been struggling with enrollment, and so we opened up and had a lot of international students enroll, and that was great. And then they had the setbacks of the governments not allowing international students to come in, and that was a problem. And then we added a smaller campus in Florida for a graduate degree program, and we said, let's get technology where the students here in our university or at our campus in Erie can take those classes in Florida. So we were adding technology into all to mirror classrooms. So you could take the same physical therapy class in Erie or in Ruskin, Florida, and with point-to-point distance learning installed classrooms, the teacher could walk in and turn on the classroom in the other city and teach to those kids. So we were already building those things in place, and then we were always guest lecturers coming in, it's much easier to just bring them in Zoom. So I think we were laying all those that foundation, at least in higher ed. I think that this is really going to continue to help, because now we're really built up for continuing that kind of level of.
Hey, Chris Clark, one of the things I've always admired about your contributions here is you tend to take like a 60,000 foot view down at the whole scope of this. What has there been something on your mind lately about education as a whole that you'd like to talk about?
Thanks for asking, Bill. Yes. But let me elaborate. I think we're in another interesting period where the politics and the public are eager to get back to normal. That is, we've been through the winter of our discontent and the fall and the summer and last spring. And the human tendency is to say, well, okay, now we've got a vaccine rolling out. There's light, there's possibility ahead. Let's rush that a little bit. Let's open up schools. Let's pretend that kids don't transmit infection to their grandparents. Let's say, well, that's negligible. Let's imagine that teachers really don't get sick and die like they have in Georgia, and I expect like they have in every other state. But those numbers aren't being publicized because they're counter to the message of returning to normal. And then there's another community similar to office hours in a way that is looking at this as a silver lining moment where, as Dan Huber said, we were nudged to do things that we wished we had done 2 years ago, but now we sort of have to up our game with regard to communication with remote students or students in other countries or other campuses, and make the most of the opportunity that we were kind of pushed into by circumstances beyond our control. And even talking with Trevor, who's often a member of the education panel, he, in his small school district in the Mojave Desert, is eager to say, well, how can we rethink the way we do public schooling in light of all of the barriers to change that have fallen by the wayside? This is a moment of opening of possibilities to do things we wish we had done, could have done, but didn't have the will or the resources to do 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So it's still a swirling stew of possibilities, no one path of which is going to be right for every school district or every state of the union. And our local control, religion almost, about education guarantees that if you have 13,000 school districts, as we do, you're going to have 13,010 different answers to what next fall is going to look like. So right now, we're not in a position where any of that is locked in because of growing infection rates and new variants of the COVID-19 virus that may or may not be prevented by current vaccines and challenges with the rollout of the actual vaccination process. So I think we're still, it's darkest before the dawn. I think we're still in that pre-dawn period. It's not so clear. And a final note is that I think what we educators need to do is help one another retain hope. That is, it's about morale. It's about mutual support. It's about measured optimism, not wild-eyed optimism. It's about doing the right thing for the students and peers in front of you, rather than trying to guess or game the national picture a year from now. So it's a time to care for one another rather than look for the technological silver bullet or the wise man or woman who says this is the direction we need to move in starting tomorrow. So
Well
it's
said.
the human side. That's
Well
my
said.
sermon for the day.
Amen. Greg had his hand up as a teacher in Stavanger, Norway, and then Laura, we'll go to you right after that. Go, Greg, and then we're going to get to the questions.
I totally agree with Chris, but the other thing is that I would argue that there is no normal to get back to. This has forever changed us. Okay, and whatever we end up with will be the new normal. But I think nobody's thinking about that. Everyone's in denial about what this means generally, and they're not seeing this as an opportunity. They're seeing it as a setback and something that we have to overcome. So I'm all for everybody getting together and trying to figure out as much as they can. I've noticed two central themes that run through all of the decisions that are happening, at least over here. One is a very strict adherence to the learning outcomes as set forth in the course descriptions. Okay, now I don't know how it is in the US, but I assume there's something like that. The course description is our contract with the student. Okay, so, but obviously, something that was written a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, cannot be totally implemented now. So there have to be some changes in that. There's got to be some flexibility. The second thing is an entirely social context in which one of the reasons that everybody's rushing to get the schools back open and get everybody back onto campus and back together, it's a social thing. Okay, because people are feeling lonely. They're feeling disconnected. Personally, I don't find that to be the case. I'm much more connected to all my friends, boom, on the screen than I am in a room. But so I think it's really interesting that the medical implications, the health and safety implications, are not even in the equation.
That makes sense to me. I also, just before Laura, and Laura needs to speak next, the disruption economically to the idea of not having kids in classrooms, I intellectually knew how big a deal that was. I did not really gut-wise understand how much the displacement of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of students for 8 hours a day or 6 hours that they were normally gone, that parents could live other parts of their lives would be. And that social disruption still astonishes me to today. Go ahead, Laura.
Sorry, I'm bouncing between windows here, but yeah, and I want to say that I have actually accepted a new position inside of our university. I'm going from academic advisor to athletic academic specialist. So I'll be working strictly now with our athletes, which is going to be a very, very good transition for me. But as I was talking to my boss the other day, once I announced that I had gotten this other position, the acknowledgement from my boss that the university had failed our freshman students was like eye-opening to me. And she said, we really are sad that we're going to lose you on the task force of how do we fix this? And I'm like, I'm only across campus. You're not completely losing me. But having that acknowledgement from my upper lines was an amazing to me. It just kind of let some of the stress off, that they know it. And I think sometimes we're lacking communication between those in administration and those on the ground.
I imagine you're going to get some serious nods out of that. Let's get into our questioner panels, our questions from the outside. And for those of you who are new to this process, let me just describe it really quickly again, because we have, I think, 6 or 7 questions, but we could certainly use more for this hour. And our conversation, we try to drive it by viewer questions, and there's close to 100 people who are watching. So if you use the Zoom chat, you will see a link to a thing called Mukana. If you follow that link and register real quick into Mukana, you can get to the office hours Mukana chat, and that is where we handle our questions. So you can put questions in there. The panel will see them. Everybody who's watching can also vote those questions up so that the issues, topics, and questions that are most important to you will get voted up, and we'll deal with them first. All that said, James Babbitt of San Diego has our first one, and he's saying, are teachers and students finding adequate audio quality for online classes? Are you using something like the office hours sound checks? How's everybody doing that? Kent, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, it's the audio for me. I'm being able, I'm
Ooh,
able
you're
to
coming in suddenly
use-
really low. You could.
Okay, there you go. I fiddled around with it a little bit.
There you go. That's better.
Mickey was okay. Yeah. See how great mine is. I try to get that more squared away than that, but the students, I haven't really been able to get them very well. But I think the most important thing is that mine is as good as it can, and so when I'm at home, I just use this setup, and when I'm at school, I've been using a lav mic, because we have those owl camera microphones, which the microphone's 40 feet away from you, and so I've just been taking my Atem Mini, and I just have like a Rode lav mic, and it's amazing how many students are coming up and saying, wow, we can actually hear what you're saying, and what a big difference that makes. And so it's tricky because audio is so difficult, and our tech people just don't have the resources to dial it in like it needs to be.
Nice. Steve Cotton, and then Michael Ball.
I think sound is a critical issue, and I spend a lot of time with my rest of my team of teachers to try. We've gone through the Paulsons and the microphones, and so for the fall, we're about ready to roll out. We're about 2 weeks away from our start time. And so we're really trying to get our sound quality better. But it's a great point. Maybe we'll start rolling the Mickey time, right at the beginning of a class, where maybe we can get the students to become more aware of their sound and their audio and try and get them. But trying to bring their level up is very, very difficult. Oftentimes there's so much noise in their environments, and it's really sometimes very hard to hear them. And I think that's where a lot of the breakdown of the education is coming, is the lack of the good sound. But I think if we could first establish the teacher connection, that the teacher's sound is really good first, then we can start working down on the other side. And thank you all for all your help in trying to get all these together. I've taken a lot of what I've learned here to try and emphasize with our teachers and our instructors. But sound is very, very critical, and I'm open to how we could get a program with the students to do that. I think taking time to do sound checks might be too long in the beginning of a class, but there's got to be some way we could do that, and I'm open to suggestions on something like that.
Well, the amount of money that they're throwing into classrooms, or at least they say they're going to be throwing in, somebody should come up with a little box that you can auto gain and auto level all this stuff that works for teachers, so that whether you're doing remote or you're doing in the classroom, what people can always hear that. Because I agree, being able to hear what is being said articulately and clearly is one of the true keys. We had Michael with his hand up, and then Mickey. Michael?
Yeah, I think I would agree that doing a full round of sound checks each time is logistically a little bit challenging. But I do think that, especially on the faculty side, and I spend a lot of time working with our undergraduate teaching assistants. So at Berkeley, we have, I guess, it varies semester to semester, but about 400 to 500 undergraduate and graduate teaching assistants each term. And so, fortunately, there's been a few things provided from the university for them, but a lot of them, have just over the last, 9 months now, have really on their own figured out what's been working for them. And so I think the good thing is to see is, everyone appreciates having or attending a class that they can hear and see and enjoy. And so a lot of the improvement has come from students, naturally realizing what works for them and what doesn't. So as fall went on and even starting the spring, just the number of headsets that I see has increased. Usually just standard iOS or mobile phone headsets, but increasing number of gaming headsets or whatnot. And students, other instructors, yeah, it is great to just be able to hear someone on the other end of a conversation.
Absolutely. Who was next? Mickey? I think it was Mickey next. No? Okay, Chris Comfort has his hand up. Go, Chris.
I think Jeff Francis has a nice little video on YouTube that helps people in a very economic way, including like the headset that Michael's wearing right now, the iOS version of using that and explaining why that's better than the built-in microphone on a laptop. I wonder if another one of those can be done with somebody who's of a younger age, so that they're talking or hearing it from a peer rather than from Jeff. I mean, Jeff's video is great, but I'm wondering if having the same information or even pared down to just the essentials from someone who's younger, speaking to the students and saying, look, this is why this works. This is how it works. It's not that difficult. I don't know, maybe something like that. I can link the video in the chat if
Okay,
you want.
Sky has his hand up, and
Love that.
Let's grab Amanda Gorman and have her do one, and it'll go around the world in poetry instantly. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Well, we've got maybe Daria. There's an option. Question to that generational conversation that Greg and I were having early before we started this morning is brilliant, Chris. I love that. The only technical issue is, please do not get the single mic, because it goes away from your head and then you start flopping and you can't hear. So
And that was a good example, because when Sky moved his microphone 10 inches away from him, he went down by about 25 decibels.
Is that a bad thing? Really?
Yeah,
really, Bill?
Well,
it's a bad thing.
We
Okay,
barely heard half of what you said, but yes, we got your point across. Who had a hand up next? I just got knocked into a different view, so I can't see everybody for a second. Roscoe, I see first.
I put the link for Jeff's video. Very good and very concise, 4 minutes long.
Very
It's
nice.
in-
Okay. So that might be a first place to take a look to answer that hardware question. Let's move on to Charlie in Westminster. And Charlie says, great panel. Has anyone here used a software called XYVid, and can speak to that? It's essentially an interactive player for online content to maneuver through slides, video, bios, and files, and so forth. He's seeing this trend grow more with online education. So XYVID is the branding. Anybody here who's in the education community seen it, have any experience with it? Looks like we're striking out. So you are now aware that it is a thing. Those of you who are interested in that slice of the technology of this. Roscoe, did you take a look?
Well, I was going to say, a lot of us have content management systems. XFID is the idea is that the slides, I believe, are actually playing back from the cloud. And so a lot of the colleges have content learning management systems or content management systems that do allow you to do just like XFID. So yes.
I am not painting this brand with this thing, but I do know there seems to be a lot of, please just subscribe to our service and we will answer all of your questions in cloud distributed content. And I'm always a little leery of those. Again, I want to be absolutely clear that I'm not speaking with any knowledge of what
It's very difficult when you've built up your entire curriculum into one system, and then every 3 years they say, oh, something new has come.
Yes.
And then all that work, does it translate? And sometimes it's like, no, you get to hand enter everything again. So
yeah. Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next one. It comes from J.J. McKinnon, Santa Venita, Lower Scabo. I don't know where that is. I'll have to look it up right after we get done with this. One of our panelists asked about how to secure and schedule a student's attention during school hours. Has anybody heard about using an interface client that would securitize that device to only access school resources during those hours of classroom? Boy, this is the... go ahead, John. Do you have...
Well, I have it. I'm sort of from the enterprise side of things, and there are tools out there that can control access to what resources a device has during certain hours of the day. The problem with using it in school is a lot of times these things get misconfigured, and it does require a high degree of technical expertise that oftentimes isn't found in the classroom. So I'm not saying it can't be done. In fact, it can be done, but it's not something that's trivial.
And I think for those outside of the internal structure of education, I know Emily has talked a lot and instructed me about, and I've learned vast amounts about how many limitations there are about privacy and the link between a student and a video into the home and things like that. It really opened my eyes to how many barriers there are to doing something like that simply. Michael Ball, then Kent Kersey, go ahead.
Yeah, so we were chatting a little bit in Mukana about this, and there's a wide range of dedicated apps that help you secure devices. So that could be things that work primarily on the website or network end. So something like a VPN that has its own access controls. It would depend on, from this question, I think it depends a lot on, are these school provided devices or bring your own device situations where they are the student's own computer? Not only does that incur different privacy decisions and questions, but also, how do you even get the software there in the first place? The place, though, that, and there's a few different standard educational technology vendors. So I forget the company name, but there's this longstanding software called Deep Freeze that ostensibly, if you have a lab machine, the idea is it resets it to a known state, for the next user. That would not be appropriate on necessarily a personal computer, but you can configure it to just lock things down and not actually do the resetting. So, there's tools like that. The place that I would start, though, whether or not you're an IT person or just a parent of a student, is probably just looking at whatever parental controls are built into the system. And most systems have some way of even time boxing those parental controls. So you could reasonably say, from 8 a.m. to 2 or 3 p.m. or whatever it is, there is limited access to things like games or certain websites, and then those turn off. But it is, I think, well put that you have to be careful how they're configured, because a misconfigured parental control or lockdown type device is just much more confusing and harmful than it is helpful in a lot of cases.
Kent and then Laura. Go, Kent.
Yeah, the question's about keeping students' attention, and that's both real. The answer is really easy, but it's also really complicated. If you want to keep students' attentions, just be awesome. Simon Sinek says you can either manipulate or motivate, and there's a lot of manipulation, people trying to manipulate all of this stuff, and it's much better to motivate and just be really cool, be interesting, which is the hard part of that, is how do you do that? And so, I think we need to focus more or less on manipulating them, because I think Emily mentioned somewhere in the thing that students are going to find hacks to this really fast. They're a lot smarter than we are, and they're going to figure something out, which is part of the learning process, maybe, right? Maybe they're learning something from figuring out how to hack into the system.
Anybody who has a link to a class that can make me cooler, I'm all in. So pass it along. Laura Thompson, go ahead.
The only thing I will add is some of those solutions do mess with the accessibility software. You've got to be very careful. Lockdown Browser in particular has an absolute adversarial, at least when I was using it, an adversarial relationship with screen readers. So I know that was an issue at one point in time. I would imagine it's still to some degree, because they're controlling the content so tightly that anything that wants to access it is not allowed.
That's an extraordinarily good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else have any comments they want to make on securing and scheduling during school hours? Okay. We will continue to move along. This was the question that Chris Clark asked earlier, and he sent me a note saying we don't have to go over it again, but I thought it led to such interesting things that I just thought I would bring it up very briefly and see if anybody wants to say anything else about what they're seeing out there in their state or district, and in your response to it now that you've had a little bit of time to percolate with it, or do you think we covered it enough so that you don't want to go there back again? We have Laura and Roscoe with other thoughts on it, and then John Pruitt.
We just shut down one of our local high schools due to a COVID outbreak, but they did not go district wide. They literally are taking a a pop-up fire approach in our area, which I really, we'll see how it goes, but I would think a more broad approach would be a little bit more, safe. But we'll see how it goes. They just shut them down, I think, Monday of this week. So we'll see.
Okay, Roscoe.
I think I mentioned this, but my son's district, which is the elementary school district where I am, is keeping the teachers at home and only sending the students to school with student aides or classroom aides and that kind of stuff, monitoring the students. However, I just heard that if a teacher goes and teaches from school, they get a $300 bonus weekly. I thought, is anyone else giving bonuses for teachers to show up at schools?
Hazard
I'm
pay?
seeing a lot of negative head shaking. Interesting.
Hazard pay?
Yeah, hazard pay. And I think it's because the participation rate on the higher income areas is quite low. I believe it's under 10%. And however, at the the poorer area, school in the poorer area, the participation rate was 85%. And I think the 85% needs more help.
So what does a doctor's visit cost?
John Pruitt?
So my question is more of a it's more of a question for the panelists than a comment, and that is, given that we've recently had a change in administration in Washington, and they seem to be taking COVID a lot more seriously with mandated masks on federal property, on transportation, airports. Do you think any of this will make an impact on the local schools if the schools will start taking this more seriously now that Washington is?
I know we don't normally go too much into politics. For me, the thing is, it's been 2 days, and I think we all want to see action. We all, every signal that is coming out of there, particularly with President Biden's wife being someone who's been in education, I think there's a sense of, well, there may be more focus, there may be more hope, but I think at the same time, everybody I've talked to has said the proof's in the pudding here. We're behind, and there are a lot of things that were said they would be implemented that maybe they haven't been, and so I think there's a certain hopeful skepticism. And as this rolls out, and I do kind of feel pretty strongly that 2 days isn't enough to figure out whether that steering wheel is being turned into a good direction yet or not. That said, we've got Tony Mobley and then Emily to speak to it. Tony.
I think I've said this before, and I kind of want to just mention it again. I think a lot of what's going on with the drive to get students and teachers back in the classroom centers around the financial aspect. I know that there are a lot of reasons why there's this drive to go back into the building. But I do think that the economic reasons is kind of driving everything right now. And so when you think about the cafeteria staff and the food companies that provide the food to the schools, when you think about the office management equipment that is delivered to the school and maintained, and you think about all of those components, all of those interworking pieces that financially benefit from students and teachers being in the building, those machines are going to continue to drive economically for the schools to be open, and that the safety of educators and students is not as important to those decision makers that are profiting off of the system. So that's just a perspective.
Fair enough. Emily?
I don't know if it was politically motivated or not, but because it may just be the variant of the UK a version of COVID was found in the next county over. But this week, at the end of the week, we were told, I think Wednesday or Thursday, that now, in addition to wearing an N95, specified N95, which will be provided by the district, where prior to Wednesday, when we got this email, it was every man for themselves. We also have to wear a cloth one over the properly fit N95 when working with students. If we're in our own offices, we can get away with just the N95. And I think that, like I said, I don't know if it was politically motivated in the sense of, well, now we have leadership saying at the federal level, this is what the expectation is. So we're just going to drop that down to our level and we won't get as much pushback because we're not arguing with the administration of the country about what is acceptable and not acceptable. But I think it's setting the tone for like, all right, look, we have to have a united front going forward. So that was just my experience this week. And I thought it was interesting that that came out pretty quickly and was implemented by the districts pretty quickly.
Did you hear any feedback from the rank and file teachers in the classroom that you work with about whether they feel that is a burden or a safety precaution that they embrace?
So the community is probably 50-50, 60-40. And the only complaints that were made were the comfort. So like people started getting the marks around their face from the N95 with the cloth mask over it. And then even I experienced this, the elastic band, I get like tender on the like third or fourth day in a row. I get like really tender ears and it hurts. But like, I had put out an email with a hack in it with a rubber band and a paper clip. And I was like, just do this. And then you can stretch it over the back of your head and it pulls it off of your ears so it doesn't hurt as much. But I guess someone sent out an email saying like, oh, cut the elastics on the N95 and then use the cloth one to hold it in place. And the administration came back and said, that is not advisable because the N95 needs to have the proper fit. And so I think like, it's becoming less of like I don't want to talk about it because I really don't want to get into that conversation feeling. But again, it's only been 2 days, but like in general, like that normally would be, something that last month people would have been like, yeah, masks don't protect you anyway. There's less of that conversation among the general crowd.
Well, and at least it's nice to hear they're looking at providing them rather than making you go out and spend your time and money to do for yourself. Laura?
To Emily's point, and I will see if I can find a link to put in the Mukana chat, but something called Oxy ears, OXIEARS, are little covers that we use over the nasal cannula tubing in oxygen patients to protect the back of their ears. That might be something to look into, to put the N95 mask, the elastic strap through that.
I also know that the 3D printing community from the very beginning of mask wearing has little straps that you put behind your bed or your head, and then they have little notches in them, and they're designed to take the pressure off of your ears. A lot of people who are in the 3D maker space with these little 3D printers print those up and just give them away. So I think there's a lot of them out there. So if you look for mask straps, I guess that's where I would start a search. And they're extremely inexpensive. I mean, they literally cost somebody half a cent to make. So you can make a batch and just give them to people if you know anybody in the 3D printing community. So anybody else have anything they want to weigh in on that question, or we move on to the Dick Brewer question from Guatemala? And Dick says, in a virtual teaching environment on Zoom, have you included ELM in the methodology to try to pre-expose the students to a specific topic that'll be explained in a virtual session? Any ELM in particular, learning management system or enterprise learning management? That's the ELM, so LMS or ELM. Anybody have any experience with that? I'm not seeing any hands go back. This may be a Roscoe, go ahead, and then we got Kent after that.
Well,
Roscoe,
no, it's so funny. I went out and looked for this. I actually came up with a psychology. It's called early learning manipulation. So I'm glad I didn't see that ELM learning management there. So I'm sorry I went off on
Enterprise.
that. But But yeah, no, yeah, I mean, sure. You, trying to, ELMs work. I mean, they haven't made any big changes because many of them were set up from the get-go to do what we call distance learning. So there hasn't been any great changes to ELM and the methodology because so many people have already used what the ELM has to offer for distance learning.
Kent Kersey and then Michael Ball. Go, Kent.
Yeah, I think someone had mentioned this, that every school has their own LMS, which would be learning management system. And we're pretty much, whatever your school has adopted, you're pretty much stuck with that. And you don't get to go choose other, I mean, I guess you could dabble in other ones, but the whole, I mean, part of the idea, I think what he's saying here is sort of the idea of a flipped classroom where you present the information ahead of time, which is the best way to do it. And Alex talks about this all the time, is you make a video with all the information on it, students watch it, and then when you get together, then you discuss. Then it's time for interaction. You do a quiz over it, you do case studies, that sort of thing. And so usually, I think a lot of people are doing that for online type stuff. And so the LMS thing, that would be the learning management system that what he was talking about, I think if you're not associated with an organization, you would use something like that. But yeah, we all have different ones that our schools have adopted.
I wonder if enterprise, in this case, business learning, and I wonder, I would assume that those people in the enterprise have looked at the lessons of LMSs across school districts and taken their ideas from them. Michael, you want to expand on that?
I think it's a little bit hard to parse what kind of changes the question is asking about making. To what Ken said, when I read it a few times, I think that model of the flipped classroom is sort of getting to the biggest change. And for me, I mean, my classes have always had all their content delivered, aside from an in-class lecture, but everything is available digitally in some form. And I tend to rely on home-built tools more than I do the university systems, although they're a component. But I think the main thing is, as we've moved digitally or to providing more content digitally, it's just making sure that students have it in an easy to access way. So that means configuring whatever tools you have to be as easy to use as possible, turning things off. The biggest difference between the enterprise side and the traditional K-12 or higher education side of LMSs is that the enterprise ones have been more remote first as the option. And so you would find in some cases things that tend to be a little bit easier for putting video lessons in a row, which I think would be helpful if you were doing the flipped classroom. But if you're using something like Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, it's not too different to drop a video in there, beforehand. It's just a matter of communicating with students what the expected workflow is. And what I've seen with a lot of instructors is, moving to a flipped classroom is a progressive experience. You don't want to necessarily do it all at once unless you have a good team of support behind you. Whereas, the enterprise systems will start with every module has a video as the workflow, but there's nothing preventing you from doing that regardless of what tool you're using.
Okay, unless there's somebody else with, Chris Clark has his hand up. Go ahead, Chris.
The flipped classroom is wonderful, but a lot of our peers aren't yet up to speed on how to actually conduct a conversation, how to make conversation break out instead of turning it into a rhetorical question asking exercise by the teacher or professor, who then winds up saying, anyone? And few respond, and then the teacher answers his or her own question and repeats the process, which is not the level of engagement, curiosity, sense making, and puzzlement that we're hoping for with the successful flipped classroom. So I think it's less of a problem to do the front side of the flipped classroom, that is providing readings or videos in advance. And it used to be that the old excuse was, well, the students didn't do the readings, so I guess I have to lecture after all. But now our feet are to the fire. And I think that where the professional development needs to kick in is helping teachers and professors who are reluctant or unused to generating conversation and authentic questions from students, giving them help in how to do that, models, examples. And it's more work. It's different work for sure than the way I've always done things. So this is where I see an opportunity for people like the panelists and others out there to promote this notion of generating authentic conversation. What does it take? What are various ways to do that? And it varies with subject matter as well, I'm sure.
Kent?
Yeah, that's a great point that Chris is bringing out. And that's one thing I've noticed is that now that I'm trying to do sort of this hybrid thing where you have some students in front of you and then you have other students at home, the hard thing is, I think for a lot of us who have been teaching for a while, when we teach in a classroom and it's a live experience, and I've talked to Chris about jazz before, but it's almost like a jazz experience. You know, you've got students in front of you, you present something, and you just, you know, you can feel when a student has something to say, and it's just a live audience and it's very spontaneous. There's improv going on, and it's, when that works, it's absolutely wonderful. But when you go to an online situation, you are now a conductor of an orchestra, and you can't just, you know, hey, violins, go ahead and riff for a while. You know, that doesn't work. You have to be very scripted. It has to be very precise. You have to be able to say, okay, you know, now we're switching to this and then we're doing that. And it is two completely different things. And when people say they don't like teaching on Zoom, it's because they're trying to do jazz with a classical orchestra and it doesn't work, you know? And so you have to be super intentional about what you're doing. And I think that's one of the hardest things, is that how do we do that? And I think what Chris is saying is that if we can figure out how to do that well, or even adequately, I think we would have advanced quite a bit.
Okay. I think we've taken care of that. I'm going to toss through this quick one from Johnny Rosso, Los Angeles, who said, any thoughts on 5G? Why the big deal conspiracy over it? We've had an era for a while of a little bit of anti-science and a little bit of whatever. Most people will have you look up non-ionizing radiation and realize that cell phones have been in use for a long time now. There's lots of research on it. And it's just, the times we live in have brought some of those kind of things, in my opinion, up. Anybody else want to say anything about the 3D craziness or 5G craziness? John Pruitt?
Yeah, I just think that it gives people a sense of control, that they know what's going on. And I have this is sort of related to my background in anthropology, and it seems to be normal for human beings to use what I call magical thinking to get a grasp on reality. And we're really bad at identifying patterns. We see patterns in everything, even ones that don't exist. So like, how many times have you seen a face in a piece of buttered toast? So we're seeing faces in 5G now. That's all it is. I'm not saying that cell phones are safe, but they're not causing COVID.
Yeah. Or anyway, there's been a lot of research, and that's a huge industry. So we're going to move on. Earl Negrete of Westlake Village, regarding state testing, how are the represented school districts proctoring the assessments as the students are remote? Are they using a lockdown browser? If yes, how do they plan to make the students loaded on their personal devices? Anybody want to talk about how you're seeing your districts or your class or anything else handle these proctored tests? Go ahead, Laura.
I know the state of Texas is doing our TSI test online proctored. And from what the students are telling me, literally, you can't get into the test unless you install the plugin. That there's a way they're blocking you from actually accessing the test. And they're using a video proctor where the student has to be on video, which there are huge issues with that. I understand that, but that's the way the state of Texas has decided to do it. While they have to be able to see their screen and their video while they're taking the assessment.
Interesting. Interesting. These are challenges. I mean, go ahead, Aaron.
So while I'm not really sure what's going to happen this year, I know in previous years, any Chromebooks that come into our school, they already have the software installed on it. So when the students click on it, it just takes over their whole computer and they can't exit out until the test is over. So I know they're on all the Chromebooks across the state or across the district, excuse me, but I'm not really sure how you would be able to have your Google Meet and the testing software open at the same time. So not really sure how that's going to work this time around.
So it sounds like we're in the very early stage of the technologists trying to figure out how to crack this particular code and make it something you can scale across the entire education community. Michael Ball?
Yeah, I don't know about the California specific state protocols very well, but and the ones that I've heard the most about or the teachers I've talked to have been primarily around things like optional tests, so things that are always mandated by the state, SATs and AP tests and like, and I mean, if you remember back to May, which was not too long after lockdown started, the AP tests last year were a bit of a disaster, as to be expected with anything, multi-year process that gets upended 8 weeks before it happens. But for the most part, if it is a personal device, the pattern of requiring some software to be downloaded and installed on a person's computer to be able to access the test environment, there's the lockdown browser is one that is frustrating to many of us for the reasons Laura mentioned and others. But it's not the only tool. But the setup of semi-controlled environment, video camera on, a window in a browser that prevents the test questions. I think that pattern exists in many environments now. And even though they're not easy to use, those solutions are relatively easy for districts, individual school associations, and so on to purchase. And so it does seem like that is the sort of short-term, good enough solution for many.
There we go. Okay. So moving to the last one, and this one looked interesting to me. Shane Foley of Ashland, Oregon. Can you share any uplifting examples where individual students have more or less come into their own and expressed either a strong latent verbal IQ by recording a rap or a speech, or conversely, demonstrating a strong latent nonverbal idea by performing a creative dance or building something? Has anybody in the education community working remotely started to see examples of students who are getting through this and thriving? Go ahead, Chris Clark.
Well, a little anecdote about my almost 17-year-old granddaughter who's been in virtual learning since the beginning. And one of her junior year of high school classes is art 2 and 3. And she has blossomed as an artist in her studio / bedroom, and was invited this week earlier to make a presentation of her approach to painting to the students in art 1 and 2, who are taught by the same teacher. And so she was nervous about it, like a new teacher would be nervous about suddenly being the teacher. And she got through it, and it was very satisfying. She saw students in art 1 and 2 whom she knew from other connections at school, and was invited by the teacher to show some of her work that was arrayed in her room before demonstrating a portrait drawing technique, a self-portrait drawing technique. And so having your students become the teacher might be an example of what the questioner is asking about. It was a huge success, but I think a lot of the credit goes to the teacher who believed that she could pull this off. She had some interesting work that nobody had seen, essentially, and hardly any of her classmates knew that she was an artist. They knew her as a musician and as an athlete, but not yet as an artist. So it had a lot of positives. I'm sure she'll remember it for a long time and maybe sign up for an art education degree when she goes to college.
We'll finish up with Emily in a minute, but I wanted the same thing. I had a personal story. My niece is I think 14 and has just recently, the last couple of years, been showing an interest in art. And I got to tell you, when she got an iPad Pro and a little stylus, that ability not to be afraid that you're going to do something wrong and to be exploratory has really, we've seen her artistic abilities just kind of blossom through that. And it causes me to think about the words digital native. We are in the generations of digital natives who grow up with these new technologies, and with hope, the kids who have latent talent, as that technology becomes more and more affordable and it goes to more and more kids, with luck, maybe we'll see a new generation of kids who are working in different ways and surprising us gloriously. Emily, you wanna?
So I've been working with some seniors on their TED Talks. So the teacher is requiring TED Talks, and this is a average English class, 12th grade, not high academic, not, like the kids aren't engaged a lot. And I went in to speak to them about how to create their video and present it in a variety of different ways. Because you had kids who didn't want to be on camera and kids that did want to be on camera and kids who, were artistic and some who weren't. And, I don't know, 23 kids in one class, and 3 of them turned in really amazing videos. That one was done in Procreate. So they took it upon themselves to create it in Procreate and animate it and make it really, really cool and interesting. And the teacher had no idea that the student had those capabilities or interests, which was really nice to be able to showcase. Another kid did a really interesting video. She cut it like a TikTok, but it was done with a regular video. And so it jumped from screen to screen in different shots. And you could tell that she thought about, angles, and like she must have done her own research on like, the off kilter means something's amiss. And so I'm going to shoot it from this off kilter from the backside going into a dark room. And so, they are all, amateur, but those kids doing it and taking it upon themselves to learn, because the teacher didn't teach them how to do that. I didn't teach them how to do that. I just told them how to upload the video. That's all. Like I was like, if you make a video, this is how you can make it. This is where you can put it. And this is how you get it to your teacher. And then I had one kid email me outside of the classroom, which hasn't ever happened before. And he was like, that video you showed, it was the coffee video, the stop motion coffee video I made over the summer. And I had showed them that as an option. He was like, how can I use that? And I was like, well, it's an app, it's free. You have to download it to your phone. So, you have to get, they're seniors. They're all pretty much 17, 18 years old. So they're allowed to download things. And I was like, so what are you thinking of doing? And he's like, oh, I just have this idea. And I was like, okay, great. And he keeps sending messages to the teacher, like, I just need a few more days. I just need a few more days. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do, because if he's putting that much effort into telling the teacher ahead of time that it's going to be late, you know what I mean? Like, whereas he's not making up excuses because someone's asking him why they haven't turned in the assignment, but he's like, it's almost ready. It's almost ready. I just have to figure out. And I get these really cryptic emails from him that'll be like, so if I want to do this, how do I do this? And I'm like, so you go back and you would delete out those 2 frames and then you would add in, and he's just like, okay, great. And I'm like, can I see it? He's like, no. Like, okay. And so like, I'm waiting with bated breath to see like what this kid's created and what the assignment is. And I have no idea what his TED Talk is about. And, there was the kids who did the work to get it done and get the grade. And, it's them talking on a screen, maybe with a PowerPoint behind them. But to see those little grains of kids actually like grabbing onto stuff and running with it is really exciting to see among what are considered kids who aren't engaged already in school, whether they were in school or out of school. And then it reminded me of that video just really quickly that I shared with the group way back in the summer of the girl who took the still shots and edited them together of what it was like to be home during the pandemic. And it just kept getting darker and darker and darker. And then, it was a YouTube, and I see if I can find it. It's in Discord somewhere, and we posted it. But, those kind of creative things that are coming out, and kids having time to work, kids who are motivated having time to work. So, looking at friends' kids taking Converse sneakers and drawing, custom made designs on them and going, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like, you could sell these. And she's like, yeah, I know. I just have to go to the thrift store and get more, more shoes or more t-shirts to draw on, or I have to go get more fabric paint. And then, them creating in it there, it gives them a little more space. Whereas if she was in school, she's a high level kid, she wouldn't have that much space to do that. So, look for those bright moments with the kids. I think those are happening more and more. But as educators, we have to allow it to happen and not expect it to be an 100% thing. Like every kid is going to make some amazing TikTok edit cut video that explains the world. It's like, no, but there are those little grains of kids that are gonna, shine through that normally wouldn't have the platform to shine through.
And give them the greatest gift of all is art is never finished, and the next one you do will be even better, and expect the next one. And that way you're going, oh, I don't have to because we want to keep trying to put all of our eggs in one basket. It's like, no, you got a whole life ahead of you. Have fun, enjoy.
Aaron?
So very similar to Emily's stories, I have, 8 to 10-year-olds, and they're coming up with some pretty amazing ideas. And they really like using Flipgrid for their video abilities. And some of them are absolutely hysterical, and some of them are incredibly informative, and some of them are both. But I realized lately that some students are like, I think I understand this math concept. Can I do a Flipgrid and show you? And I'm like, of course you can. And then I ask them, can I use it to put up on our classroom so that on Google Classrooms that others can see it too? And they're like, oh yeah, of course. And these are kids that would typically not participate, or they would do like the bare minimum, like do what they had to do and just move on. But another huge thing I've seen in my remote setting is the concept of the discussions that I get in the breakout rooms. So while maybe they're not as tech savvy as like high schoolers or as college level students, the amount of discussion that they're having in between, as I'm popping in and out of breakout rooms, is absolutely incredible. The fact that their vocabulary is changing and they're able to be focused more on what they're supposed to be learning about. So if they're working on a math concept, they're not hearing the rest of the class talk about their math concepts and what they're thinking of. It's just their small group. And I think that's a big change.
This sounds to me like there's a touch of the idioms of social media that are percolating into education in both directions. I mean, this generation appears to be comfortable in those kinds of spaces, and I'm hearing a reflection of that as good teachers are turning that natural inclination of them into an extension of the learning process. That seems like, because boy, kids do seem to love that across. Roscoe, do you have a thought?
Well, I'm just going to share something from yesterday that I thought was just very kind of uplifting. In that we have a young man, I think he came here a couple weeks ago, Benjamin Antiput. He's 18. He's a senior in high school. And here it is. He is a big user of QLab. He's a very bright young man. And I'd be surprised if he isn't gone. He's way beyond us already in some ways. But he had an opportunity to host the post show. Alex wandered off and no post show. So Benjamin says, hey, I'm going to host the post show, which runs after office hours. And by the end of the show, he has the owner of the company talking to him. He has Sam, who's just wonderful. And he goes, guys, I'm going to be missing my math class if I stay here. And he was kind of panicked. But still, here you have an 18-year-old who has two people that have built software that he just dreamed and learned and knows inside and out, talking to him directly. And that's the magic of this new medium in some ways, too.
Yeah, the disruption, things grow up, sidewalk gets broken, things grow out of the cracks, and we're seeing that more than as much as I had hoped to, maybe is the right way to put it. I think we're at the tail end of the questions. Thank the education panel as always. You guys, we just love you being here, and I wish we could have you more often, but we are appreciative of the time you were able to spend with us on office hours. We go back to the normal schedule. Tomorrow is our kind of relaxing day. Sunday is more, as Alex puts it, philosophical. And so we'll do 2 hours tomorrow, and then we'll be back on Monday for the next run. Those of you who enjoyed today, come back. The education panel will be here next Saturday, and we will do the Again, thank you all for watching Office Hours. Roscoe, do you have your hand up? That
Yeah,
doesn't
just
look
be
like a
aware
wave.
that next week there's going to be training that starts after our education hour, so
that's
we may
right,
be
yes.
condensed a little bit. So try and make sure we get here on time, and we'll nail it out.
Yeah, let's go, and we'll. I know Alex will be tougher about not being quite as sloppy about the opening time and the closing time, but I just want to let this discussion run as much as it needs to. Thank you all, and we will see you all the next time. Bye, one and all.